Hello and welcome to Storytelling with Pup. We will, as always, start with a story.
Thriving with nature. Clinically boxy, the grey hospital building was a stark contrast to the soft brightness of nature which surrounded it. Inside, I knew it was clean and bright and sterile, as a hospital should be, but it was the outside which beckoned me. I had grown to appreciate the decision of those in charge to transfer the space around the hospital to use for growing food, for encouraging community, for social prescribing. There were swaths of grass and concrete which it wanted to use to bring healthier changes and choices to the community around it. Slowly, the diggers had removed the concrete, the grass had been turned, fresh, loamy soil faced the sun again. Then the people arrived and marked off sections and planned squares and rectangles of all the food the hospital and its community might need. Basics like potatoes and carrots grew alongside fruit trees and shrubs. Nut and berry-filled hedgerows provided division between plots. Tomatoes and salads grew under recycled plastic protection. Walking slow but eager towards the community garden, I heard the murmur of conversation, punctuated with giggles and shouts of children. A warm scent of earth and growing things pulled me into its safe embrace. I arrived at my home away from home, my second chance. Almost 2 years ago, I was falling and failing, spiraling downwards into the depths of nothingness. My body craved attention, nutrition, softness, care, yet my mind had nothing to give, could share none of the energy if it was holding, just to stop me breaking apart and dissolving into the dark. I lost everything. I almost lost myself. And then I was found. Despite all I was experiencing, I could never resist someone else's call for help. My friend knew this and used the knowledge for good. They called and asked, could I? Would I? How could I refuse? That small tendril of curling green lifeline wrapped around my finger and slowed my fall. Gardening was a hobby until I lamentably lost my home to the powers of nature. I enjoyed the gritty feeling of dark earth between my fingers and beneath my nails. It felt so good to connect with something so primeval, natural. Passing seasons brought their own identity and beauty. Inhaling the scent of decomposing leaves in autumn and winter, all the bright flames dying to brown. A slow greening against the dark buds and shoots, pushing themselves out into life in spring. Bright rainbows of petals in the height of sun-warmed days, as flowers blossomed and bloomed with scents so heady you could taste the perfume on your tongue. I expanded through each change, progressed through the seasons deliberately and joyously, my body relishing its movement through the tasks required to maintain my little piece of peace. Where I lived now was nice. It was not my place of peace. I wondered if I would ever feel that safety and serenity ever again after the tumult of disaster and loss I had experienced. All my home and garden, my love and work remained only in my memory and under the salt water of an encroaching sea. The waves of salt had brought waves of destruction, waves of sadness, and were ultimately followed by waves of blackness, which led to depths of nothingness. I had nothing, and therefore I felt I was nothing. My friend thought otherwise. And so, today, a year from that tendril of lifeline, I am here connecting again with the earth and nature and people, my community. We have become a connection of humans, a cooperative with nature, bringing food and laughter and health together for the benefit of all. I greeted my fellow growers as I collected my tools and navigated my way to my tasks for today. Walking the boarded paths, I carefully trod past the carrots where Mary, grey hair hidden under a knitted cap, hummed a tune as she weeded between the rows. Losing her husband had brought her so much grief, which was now being tempered by the feeling of possibilities growing under the soil. She smiled at me softly, still a trace of wistful sadness, but nevertheless a smile with happiness within it. Andy, digging over an empty plot, preparing it for the tomatoes, currently warm and cozy under their recycled plastic protection, stopped and leant on his spade, wiping his forehead with a grubby hand. He waved, caught his breath, and then continued turning the soil. Turning the soil as he was turning his life around, turning away from unhealthy addictions towards healthy growth. Gardening together provided us with more than simply produce to sell, share, eat. It sparked conversations, grew friendships, nourished health in mind and body, and paid money, for despite our utopian dreams, we still cannot survive without money. Together, our community and the hospital, we were becoming more sustainable, healthier, happier. My old garden, sleeping beneath the sea, had brought me joy. While this new garden may not be mine, it brings me joy and something more. It brought me back to me. It found and returned my self-respect. It is allowing me to rebuild a life full of happiness, to create a greener future for myself and for others.
What a fantastic story. Thank you so much, Sharon Summers, for sharing that during this week's Storytelling with Puck. I mentioned to her at the time that I love the idea of a garden bringing joy, but also there's a line which she says right at the end, which is, "It brought me back to me."
Yeah.
It's really quite a special line, and I think lots of people will have associations with this. It might not be gardening necessarily, but it could potentially be playing a musical instrument, or potentially joining a band with that musical instrument, because then you get the community aspect to it as well. I don't know if you have any ideas of kind of where sometimes you get that feeling.
Or for like going hiking or rambling with a group of friends, so you're really out in nature. Yeah, I think those kind of being in nature and being with people, uh, we can all
Connect.
connect with that.
Yes.
My words after reading that story.
Um, so as Anne is losing her words, let me introduce you to what this evening is. We've had a great week of stories. We've had lots of you posting wonderful poems and pieces that I think came from the heart, explaining kind of what it is that matters to you, sometimes through non-fiction, sometimes through fiction, but managing to get your message across. And it's been wonderful to read your stories across the week. We've of course posted a few of our own as well. And tonight is really just about sharing a few stories, and I guess just having a bit of a chat about how they make us feel. I believe, yes, hello. Andrew has just joined us. Hi, Andrew, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Nice to be here.
Very nice to have you. Very nice to have you. So I think you may have had a few technical difficulties getting in. If anybody else is having technical difficulties too, please send me a message and I'll try and fix them for you. How has your storytelling week been, Andrew? I know you've always got something going on in the storytelling world.
Well, at the moment, I'm just busy putting my course online. So I'm actually getting fed up listening to myself speaking to myself. So,
You're like, say that in your line of work.
well, because I've heard it all before, you see, I'm having to listen to myself over and over again by doing this stuff on the screen. So I'll be very pleased when it's done. And today I was just talking to my partner, Faye, about her day, because I think one of the great things about building a story library is that you can share each other's day. If you're not sort of together during the day, you sort of regroup at the end of the day and say, well, how was your day? And then but she came up with some amazing stuff from today, which I will share at the appropriate time.
Fantastic. We look forward.
Hopefully with her permission, but let's see. It depends what the stories are.
Oh no, I won't. Yeah, I'll just say the stuff that's broadcastable.
Okay.
Okay. I think if we've got people watching on YouTube now, the intrigue level has just shot up a little bit. That's what we call a hook, isn't it, Andrew?
Dopamine. Dopamine.
Exactly, dopamine levels are rising. We were just explaining that we've had some great stories coming across to us during the week, and we've really enjoyed what we've seen. We'll be honest, it's been a little bit quieter than some other storytelling with Puck years, mainly because we didn't advertise as much as usual. But at the same time, the quality has not been lost. The quality has been fantastic. So maybe in that vein, what we can do is read another one of the stories that somebody has posted this week, and then we'll come back to the conversation. And I think by that point, Andrew should have revved up his energy and allowances to tell Faye's story. So I think maybe we'll go for a story called Winifred by the wonderful Janice Taylor, who, if anybody had watched the Zoom from last week, Janice was with us live, which is always better, but hopefully my voice gives this story some level of justice. Winifred. Somewhere on a production line, one lone worker has, over many years, decided to whisper a prayer over every batch of product she has direct contact with. And it is a simple one. May this item bless and keep you, bring you joy, and grant you peace and protection. Each prayer is whispered with deep conviction and love for every person who purchases the item, regardless of where they are or who they are. He will never know the exact location of each batch, but as they are shipped out, each carries her best wishes, love, and protection. Winifred is not concerned with who ends up with the product. She simply wishes them to be blessed, joyful, content, and safe. To her, all life is precious and to be honored and revered. So, Winifred sits and blesses each batch as it passes by on the production line. It doesn't matter how bone weary she feels after a shift. She believes it is her purpose. And if you look closely enough, you will see a smile playing around her lips as she aligns the bottles to be filled. Saying a prayer over the thousands, no, millions of bottles of the deodorant is her way of bringing meaning to her day, her way of reclaiming herself, her purpose, and her sanity, her one small act of rebellion. I really love that story from Janice. The A few of you will have noticed that we put prompt on the website this week, so that if people wanted to create stories, they could use the prompts that we put on there to help them get a little bit further with the creative process. And Janice took this up and she used the deodorant as her prompt. And what I loved was the idea of how she could talk about protection within protection, the protection of the soul and the protection of the body, through the prayers and then through the actual use of the deodorant, what we all use deodorant for. Normally, I think she delved deep and used both the literal and the metaphor in that story, which I really liked. Andrew, do you have any thoughts on that at all?
Andrew, you're on mute.
I wrote down that I love the terminology. Bone weary was a beautiful description, as was playing around her lips.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I might have to steal that. That was really lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe, I wonder if we could set ourselves a task to try and get Bone Weary into our general conversations once a week. That would be
Which reminds me of what barristers sometimes do. They have a game with each other, don't they, to try and get the word elephant into their summation in the court without the judge noticing.
Yeah, maybe we can challenge all
Yeah.
ourselves next week. I have some presentations in work. Maybe I can. I shouldn't volunteer myself for that, but
No, you're done. You've done it now.
I think you just have.
Yeah.
one of those phrases in.
Exactly that. Exactly that. Yeah, I think I think the fun of being able to play with words, the beauty in what Janice did to be able to kind of dig deeper into the meaning of what most people would think of as just something that you use in the morning to kind of spray yourself with. But I think that's one of the reasons stories can be so powerful, and they create well, I guess a human connection, which is something that I'm sure Andrew will want to talk about a little bit more detail later on. In a way that I think we all love when we're in the storytelling game.
Yeah.
But I think
Andrew,
it also relates to this idea. I mean, I work in the business world really, and a lot of business people just default into this very dry corporate speak, which is very abstract in nature. It's very cold. It's very inhuman. And I always love it when people become a bit more playful, with the language. They're able to. I like that word playful, so they can still be professional, but they're just putting a bit of an edge to it. And then also sort of using metaphors and thinking metaphorically as well. It's wonderful that you can see meaning in something like deodorant and find an angle and sort of weave it into some kind of story.
100%.
Well, also finding the meaning of being somebody on a production line, packing boxes or filling bottles. From the outside, people would think, well, there's no purpose in your job, there's no meaning in that, you're just doing it for the hourly wage. But actually, as an individual, it can mean much more to you. That story told from the perspective of the line manager would be an entirely different story.
Yeah, that's a really good
Yeah.
point. So I think we're ready. Tell us, Andrew.
Oh right, okay. So yeah, so I think just going back to the catching up with my partner at the end of the evening theme. I think a lot of people I find say, well, I don't have any stories. Nothing interesting ever happens to me. And they don't build up this sort of library. But at the end of the day, you literally at the end of the day, I didn't mean at the end of the day, but I do literally mean at the end of the day, you can have a catch up with your partner, and then they'll typically tell you something, the highlight of the day, something unusual that happened. So today was rich in content from Faye. I have to say, she did sterling work today. She managed to get locked into Aldi. I'm assuming you have Aldi where you are in the Netherlands.
We do, yeah.
Like Germany, so yes.
Yeah. So she was in there, and all of the tills went down because they lost their computer system. And people were obviously wanting to buy their goods. They were at the checkout, but they couldn't buy them. And they wanted to go with their shopping, but they couldn't buy it. So the store manager had to consider whether or not to let people leave on the assumption that they'd come back and pay. So the honesty of it. But in the end, and also he was very concerned that people shouldn't be allowed to come into the store, because obviously that would exaggerate the problem that he had. So he locked everybody in for a while, and they were begging to leave and offering to put their shopping back, and or come back, I'll pay for it, honest. So being locked into Aldi was a surprising thing. I've not heard that before. And then when she got home with her 15-year-old daughter, her daughter went through to the kitchen. They came through the front door, went through to the kitchen, and she said, "Mum, the back door's open." So immediately they're assuming that they've been burgled and there might be a burglar in the house. So they very gingerly walked around the place. They noticed that the TV was still there and all of the computer was still there and so forth. So there isn't really a great end to this story, in the sense that there was no burglar. It was just the imagination playing with them. And I think she just hadn't locked the back door properly when she left. So those are the only two broadcastable bits of what she's told me tonight.
Maybe when we're off broadcast, Andrew, I'm going to have to ask you about some of the non-broadcast bits. I'm intrigued now.
But she's very good at finding. I mean, what you were talking about before, and Cyan as well, about finding meaning in small things, small occurrences. And we've had this conversation before where people say, well, nothing interesting happens to me. I think they're looking for something too big. And actually good storytellers notice small things.
Yeah,
Obviously,
yeah,
the way
100%.
that you write and the way that you describe and read out the stories that other people have written, they're beautifully observed and they're very tightly observed. And that's what makes it, vivid and paints pictures in people's minds, which I think is amazing. So she's very, very good at finding small things. But the other thing that relates to what you've just been doing there is that she is a very skilled voice artist.
Oh,
She's well, I can't say how old she is because that would be ungentlemanly, but let's say she's a late bloomer as an actor. And she never knew she never knew that she could act, but she actually is very good with accents, and she's particularly good with a Liverpool accent. So she gets work occasionally as an extra, but they call it a supporting actor. And she was actually on telly the other day. There's a thing on BBC iPlayer at the moment which is called Miss Austen, as in Jane Austen.
yeah, I've seen that advertised. Yeah.
And if you look at the first episode, around 42 minutes in, there's like a dance, and she's there on the right hand side of the screen in a green dress. And we got very excited, look at seeing her on stage or on screen, and get very annoyed with the people in the foreground who were actually the actors. I mean, no, I want to see the woman in the background. So because she started doing voice work, she actually got a cast role in a new Netflix series. And I can't really say what it is because if this is going out, we're not meant to say, but it's going to be out in 2026. And she had a car sent for her the other day to do some her screening. A chauffeur arrived in a car, and she had a trailer, albeit a very small trailer,
And the train.
a trailerette.
That's absolutely fantastic. Yeah.
So
So
she's really talented, and what she started doing now, she's building a little show reel, and she's even found a way of doing railway announcements in a funny voice, and it's really good. She's scripting it as well, so I think she's found a new career at the age of
yeah, it's a good age to be finding a new career at as well. But yeah, next this time next year she should hopefully, if she's not too famous by that point, um she should join us for storytelling with Puck, because by the sound of it, she's great at finding stories and can clearly tell them.
she's very good at telling them, because I'm really interested. I've always loved acting. I've always been interested in acting, and I've loved the way that actors connect with an audience. I was listening to I know I'm going off at a bit of tangent here. I was listening to Gary Oldman talking the other day about when he was acting in the Batman movies, and Christopher Nolan was the director. And he said Chris Nolan's not the type of person to give you lots of notes,
Okay.
guidance, improvements.
Yeah.
But he said he's only ever given him two notes, and one of which was where he had to deliver a monologue. And all Christopher Nolan said to him is, just a bit more at stake. So in other words, the intent behind the line needed to
Yeah.
show that there was a bit more at stake in the delivery of the line. So if you work on the intent, then the outward delivery changes.
I really like that, because that gives the actor the opportunity to feel it rather than to outwardly change.
Mm.
So yeah, as you say, because you have the intent, you're able to go, okay, if I were actually in that situation, if something was at stake, how would I feel? And then what would happen to the way that I speak?
Yes.
Whereas if somebody says speak with a slightly higher pitch, but you can't work out why, or somebody says, shout a bit louder,
Yeah.
you could maybe be squealing rather than, if something incredible is at stake, you might not be screaming, you might go deeper because you want to be
Mm.
authoritative. It depends
Mm.
on the exact
It's a bit.
situation.
It's a bit like people who are sent on listening skills classes or training, And they said, well, I ummed and erred. I ummed 3 times. I went, ooh, that's interesting. At least twice. I nodded and said, really? At least 3 times. So that ticks all the boxes. So that's the surface approach, isn't it? As opposed to being genuinely interested to understand somebody and what they've been through, then the outward behaviors change because of the inward motivation.
Oh, that's interesting. Sorry, that's a bit nasty.
What did you say? I missed that. What did you say?
I did a very fake. Oh, that's interesting.
Oh, right. Okay. Sorry, I drifted off then for a moment.
If I'm going to make a bad dad joke, Andrew, you have to at least pretend to laugh. That's part of the
I'll
rule.
blame the delay on the line.
Okay, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. Right, I think on that very interesting note, maybe we can read another story. I think Cyan has got her voice back after after reading the first one. So are we reading the portrait? I say we. Are you reading the portrait? Okay.
Find your inner Meryl Streep.
Far too high.
Or Saoirse Ronan.
Now you're just making Saoirse Ronan sound like she's not as good of an actor. I think we should stop while we're ahead. Okay, I'm going to calm my laughing. Sam, over to you.
The portrait was broken. He could not have foreseen it. It was an accident. He bumped into it while staring at the blank screen of his computer. It had been a busy day, one of those where your head is full of ideas but nothing materializes. For minutes, maybe hours, he stared at that blank screen while scrolling through endless memes on his phone. It didn't make any sense, but he had grown used to it. His arm had moved involuntarily, but he didn't notice. The motion seemed detached until crash. 1,000 shards of glass filled the wooden floor like an impossible puzzle. He froze for a moment, just staring at them. Sorry, I didn't mean to, he mumbled to the boy in the picture, which was now covered in glass. That boy was him, just a couple of decades younger, with a bit more hair and perhaps more sanity. Though at that moment, the guy and the boy seemed like completely different individuals. After staring at the broken glass for what felt like an eternity, he rapidly snapped out of his trance and rushed to find a way to fix the mess. As he cleaned the shattered glass, he gazed at a teddy bear across the room. A dusty teddy bear. His bear from when he was 6, around the same time the photo had been taken. He then impulsively took his phone and, positioning the bear near the broken portrait, he took a photo, as to mend a broken heart. After that, he desperately threw the broken frame in a rubbish bag, in a stupid whim to make it appear that nothing was ever broken. Back at his desk, he found himself staring at the computer screen again, now filled by the digitized photo. His new photo frame. He stared at it for a moment, then, as if nothing had changed, returned to scrolling through memes on his phone. This story isn't about portraits, teddy bears, or memes. So that was by Alifre Putenja, and that was using some of the prompts that we gave a few days ago. So the prompts, as you may have guessed, were photo frame, computer, and teddy bear. I love it.
I love that story too. And interestingly, it brings me to, I think, getting Andrew involved a little bit deeper in this conversation because Andrew and I had a private conversation a few, I don't even know, was it a week ago, about something which he is setting up called the human equation. And some elements of this story, let's just say, made me think about it, and maybe you can realize why, Andrew.
Well, no, I'd like you to explain. Give me a hint.
Oh, now I feel like I'm at school. So to me, there's something about the idea of the the loss of connection. So as a child, the teddy bear, the the connection that he even had with other people, the connection that he had with toys, disappeared as technology started to take over. And all he was then interested in was looking at memes. And for a split second, it almost came back because something bad happened to a photo frame of a memory of once. Um, and maybe as somebody who has experienced both life with a bit less technology or a bit less social media anyway, that type of technology, and experienced life with it being in our faces, we can, blend the two to a degree, and maybe understand what's missing. But for some people who have grown up with always having social media, that's where sometimes it becomes a lot harder to connect, and where I think it then links to the human equation. Maybe you could take it from there, Andrew. Was that a good enough piece there for you?
No, I agree. I agree. Well, it echoes a lot of what this guy talks about in this book, The Anxious Generation. So I don't know whether any of your listeners have come across this, but it's by a guy called Jonathan Haidt. It's pronounced Haidt. It's Haidt. And he talks about how we've replaced a play-based childhood with a phone-based childhood.
Mm.
So it kind of echoes, what you were talking about there about, we used to grow up with objects, with teddy bears, I used to have Hot Wheels and Scale Extric and Meccano in the dim and distant past, and Airfix models and so forth, and played football and played golf and played cricket and tennis and so forth. That was my play-based childhood. And now it seems that, people are spending a huge amount of time when they're young looking at a screen, and almost vicariously living their life through the recorded activities of other people.
Mm.
Yes, even watching on YouTube other kids play a game,
Yeah.
which I still cannot get my head around.
Yeah. So I see lots of teenagers in cafes huddled around phones, and they're showing each other funny videos that people have posted. And I wish they'd actually have their own experiences. So I think anyway, the human equation, as you alluded to, Stefano, is a new concept of mine that I started with a friend of mine last year, and it's all around a reprioritization of quality human connection in the digital age. And obviously, it's ironic that we're now speaking through a Zoom link, but I think this is the use of technology which does facilitate, a really beautiful human connection that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. So where it complements our lives and complements human interactivity, I think it's a wonderful thing. But where it replaces it, I really worry about that. And I wish we could reverse the tide or reverse the trend, which is what I'm trying to do. So you'll be familiar with King Canute, who sat on his throne on the beach and tried to turn the tide back. That's how I feel at the moment.
I hope it's not quite that level of a challenge. Otherwise, well, you never know. Maybe you could be the first.
But I think there's an appetite for it. I think we live in a world now where we're being persuaded that technological developments will make life better. That's the answer. And I think in many respects, where technology frees us up to do things which are distinctly human and the things that we really are uniquely equipped to do, that's a wonderful thing. But where it replaces it, the opportunity cost of 5 to 8 hours a day on social media, which is kind of what it's like in the States at the moment. You imagine the amount of time that is being lost to things like sleep and physical socialization and physical touch because of the amount of time spent in isolation looking on a phone. I think it's really shocking. And so anyway, that's what the campaign, the movement is about, to reprioritize and rebalance.
As you know, I agree with you on all of this, and I hope that maybe it triggers something to if anybody is watching on YouTube. I think I saw that at least a few people are. Then hopefully a few of those people will trigger them to go, oh, I need to have more conversations. I need to I need to speak to more people in real life. Um, we talked about the other day the idea of everybody gathering around the phone and all watching something on YouTube and then kind of laughing together does weirdly connect them because they're all laughing together at something that's on YouTube. But imagine how much deeper a connection it would be if they were all laughing at something that one of them did, or one of them said
Or they
to
were
each
doing
other,
it together.
or they were doing together.
Yes.
Exactly that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it is a form of group social activity,
Mm.
to gather around a series of phones in a cafe and laugh at stuff. But if you, I mean, he makes the point, Jonathan Haidt, that if you, at the end of your life, if you look back and you try and identify, the 10 key moments or the 6 key moments of your life when you experience the most joy and fulfillment, it wouldn't have involved looking at a screen. Unless it was maybe the first time your mum or your dad took you to the movies, that might be a different one.
But I think that has a lot less meaning nowadays. If you spend your life looking at a screen, it's now just a bigger screen. Yeah. So even that for the younger generation is probably gone.
Yeah. Also, as well, there's even people who do have that memory of going to the cinema for the first time, maybe as you say, with their mum and dad, or even with friends. The experience was probably less about watching the screen and a lot more about the fact that they were for the first time going to this incredible environment and they got that connection with their mum and dad or with their friends that they didn't have before. Um, as you say, the moment isn't about the screen, not really. They probably can't even remember what the film was a lot of the time. So yeah, the moment.
I took my son once to the Natural History Museum in London, which is the most astonishing. I mean, I remember when my dad took me when I was a kid, so I wanted to almost replicate the experience for my eldest son, Matthew. And he was probably about, I don't know, maybe 8 or something at the time. And on the train on the way back, we did the debrief, about what did you enjoy the most? Was it the spiders? Was it the snakes? Was it the huge dinosaur? Was it the blue whale hanging from in the entrance hall? And he said, no, I really liked the Maltesers you bought me from the shop. And I could have done that at Tesco's.
Yeah.
Maybe they taste better in a natural history museum.
So I probably went there for me. I went there to recreate an experience I'd had with my dad, I suspect. But I do think he enjoyed it. But that was not the thing he didn't focus on the same thing I would have focused on.
Yeah, that is interesting. I guess it's how we will develop and how we will change. But at the same time, although the Maltesers might have been the standout, I bet in reality the standout was just spending time with you. That's going to be what when he looks back on it, Maltesers won't be there. Won't be the thing that make them smile now. Or maybe they will.
But I had a lovely conversation. There's a lady, and I'm connected with quite a few people in the States at the moment around this human connection concept, because they are, there might be authors, they might be researchers, academics, people working in the field of mental health and so forth. And I spoke to this lady who'd done quite a bit of work at Google, and she'd run sort of story sharing sessions within Google, and the connection and the human connection and the vibe, she said, was astonishing, and they'd never experienced that kind of connection with each other as a result of what they've been doing. And it was ironic that it was done in Google,
Yeah, there is an irony to that. But I think that does, to a degree, play back to what you said earlier, which is that technology can be used for good and can be used for connection. And actually, lots of technology that we now have because of Google, it can connect you. I know this is a slightly different story you're telling. It's just the fact that it was on Google premises, but But yeah, so there is an irony to it, but I think we need to be careful about which bits of technology we embrace and which bits we try our best to not necessarily turn away from, but just reduce the amount of time we spend with.
I think where, and again, going back to this thing about replacing human interaction, Lee and I set up this. He's called Lee Alley, and whenever I say Lee, Ali, and I, it sounds like three people. It's only two people. Lee, Ali, and I set up the human equation, just the two of us. The other guy didn't turn up. We both set this thing up, and Lee works in the field of exhibitions. And in exhibitions, people who staff the booths, they kind of get bored and they're on their phones and they don't engage with people. And they'll say, "Could I just scan your name badge when you walk up to the booth?" And they think their job has been done once they've scanned the badge. So again, they're using it to avoid the awkwardness of building rapport with a stranger and finding out why they're there and all the rest of it. I think that's a sad aspect of technology.
Yeah. I have to say, when I go to conferences and I'm the person on the booth, which I occasionally do, I'm all about the connection and the conversation, and I actually find it really awkward that at the end I'm like, "Oh, can I scan your badge so that I can?" Because it is part of the job, but I
Yes.
feel like it's a strange way to end the conversation.
Yeah.
Oh, well, now I need to do this. Ideally, with the idea of continuing the connection and having a conversation
Yeah.
afterwards,
But at
but
least
it
you've
feels
had the
not in
conversation
the
first.
way.
Yeah, at least you've had the conversation. It's not replaced having the conversation.
Typically, this is a piece of technology that often doesn't work well.
Yeah.
So then it really, really gets in the way.
Yeah. I don't know if how common it is in the UK, Andrew, as well, to have these days menus at restaurants which are on your phone rather
Mm.
than being actually at the table in the restaurant. There's a similar scenario there, I think, as
Yeah.
well, where it encourages everybody to be on their phone. So the first thing you do when you walk into the restaurant is you scan the QR code with your phone so that you can get the menu up, and then everyone is looking at their phone, and you walk into a restaurant, and this isn't even people intentionally being rude. This is because it's the only way they can access the menu.
Mm.
But as soon as people are on their phone, that's it. They're
Yeah.
distracted, and they've got this amazing shining light in front of them, and they don't want to do anything else.
Well, you don't even get me started on restaurants because, well, Chris Marsh, who's a friend of mine, he posted a story on our Human Equation website because we're collecting stories on there as you do with yours. And he said that a couple of his friends and him they just were hungry one evening, early evening in Manchester. They walked into a restaurant around 5:30 in the evening and were turned away because they hadn't booked online. They were only accepting online bookings, and they were a walk-in. They weren't doing walk-ins. So they walked away a bit disgruntled, and then they paused, and Chris had a brainwave and went online and found the app and booked online, and then they let them in.
Wow. Okay.
I don't actually know how to react to that.
So I think restaurants, it's a rich seam of material for the human equation is restaurants.
So,
Yeah, I think so too. Okay, I think it's time to share a story that definitely, or a poem that definitely, it's a very short poem, that definitely links to the human experience. And in fact, I might share a couple of them because they really, really, really are short. Um, but if we are ready, this one is called Record Player. Yesteryear's anthems, living room disco venue, vinyl records spin. And this one is called Photo Frame. Faux gold color trim, ode to the treasure keeper, finishing group. They were both by Ingrid Sangiwa, who has posted a haiku literally every single day during the storytelling with Puck Week.
Wow.
And those are just two of them that she's put out there. The reason I specifically wanted to read the record player one though was uh, because of the idea of the living room disco. Uh, and we were talking about real life experiences, and that to me is definitely a sense of a real life experience. I don't know what you guys think.
Definitely. It's also a way for getting away from your phone again. We recently bought a record player so that we can disconnect from the phones once in a while and have something some
You know,
old.
I think that the sound of the needle when it just touches the vinyl is one of the most beautiful sounds in the world.
Yeah, crackling.
Yeah.
Just amazing, amazing.
And it also forces you to actually forces maybe isn't the right word, but encourages you to really listen to a full album the way that the artist intended you
Mm.
to listen to it and not just skip a song and you just, take your time a little bit and not have a playlist curated by Spotify for you.
Do you know that? Are you familiar with this idea that sometimes you plan an evening and it's all planned out and it's going to be wonderful, but something tells you that it's not going to happen the way you planned? Because this happened to me and Faye a few weeks ago. Um, we decided I booked a karaoke booth in Manchester because we both love singing, we both love karaoke, and no, I'm not going to do it now. And we thought, well, we'll have a bite to eat and we'll go do some karaoke. It'd be really, really nice. And I live in Macclesfield, which is in Cheshire. It's about 25 kilometers south of Manchester, so 25-minute train journey. So we walk from my house to the train station, and we're all ready for a lovely evening out in Manchester. And when we arrived, two things happened that kind of made us realize we weren't going to go to Manchester. First of all of the trains had been cancelled for some strange reason. And there must have been something on the line or, some problem. No trains to Manchester. Secondly, there was a man who was either drunk or on drugs being wrestled to the ground by four members of staff right outside the entrance to the train station. so, so we both looked at each other and thought, this isn't happening, is it? Should we just have an evening at home or locally? So we just popped into a local pub for a while and we went back to mine and we switched the telly on and we put karaoke on my screen and we sang in the living room all night. The neighbour's now moved. She's moved. I don't know whether, I think it's coincidental. She said she didn't hear anything, but she's not there anymore now.
Okay. Did it cost a lot to replace the windows?
And they let me off the karaoke booth deposit as well because I couldn't get into Manchester for reasons which they seem to accept.
That is good of them. There's a still generosity at heart in some places in that
Yeah.
case, and also I think just good awareness of brand because you'll probably go back.
Yeah, well, I was also very impressed with the way that the railway staff dealt with the guy, because I think they kind of quite liked the heroic element of all piling onto him and restraining him.
Probably did. They probably did.
They all had a good story as well to go home with that night.
They did. And I went back, I got the train the next week and I said, were any of you guys on top of that guy? And once, yeah, I was.
Did he explain why?
No, I think he was either drugged up. I think he might have been on drugs because he was very, very powerful. That's why it took four of them to restrain him. So I think he was really hyped up. But it's funny, isn't it, that sometimes the best planned evenings don't often work out, but it can be better because something unplanned happens.
No, 100%. Interestingly, I even find that with some of the storytelling with puck events we've had over the years, sometimes we've expected maybe just a couple of people to come on and it's exploded, and we've had 15 or so people on, and then that's a completely different show to the one that we had expected. And other times we've maybe expected a few more people, and there's been one or two, like this evening. But then we have completely different types of conversations, and we can go a bit deeper into the conversations than we might have been able to do if there were lots of people on the call. So even that is a smaller version of what you're saying. But again, yeah, that change of a plan isn't a bad thing. There's something to the idea of having a plan is a good idea,
Mm.
but being ready and willing to adapt is, I think, the key to making the plan successful.
Yeah, I think so. And it's the same with network. I don't know whether how you feel about this sign, whether you go to sort of networking things, but they're often sold on the basis that, oh, there'll be 100 people there. It'll be amazing. But actually, the best events are often where there's maybe 20 or 25 people there.
Yeah, I think so. It's also quite often a lot less intimidating, especially if you don't really know many people. So yeah, I much prefer smaller networking because then you
Mm.
have deeper conversations. Whereas with the much bigger ones, people are just running around to get business cards or LinkedIn contacts and not actually having any real discussion.
Yeah, yeah. It's again, it's a numbers game. It's a very shallow connection, a bit like the scanning your name badge kind of approach.
Exactly.
Exactly that. Okay, I think we're probably going to say our goodbyes in 5 or so minutes, but maybe we can share a couple more stories before we do, if that's all right with you, Andrew.
Of course, yeah.
I don't know if you have anything you would like to share at all. I know that your stories are often in your mind library rather than written down somewhere.
I'm too lazy to write them down, I'm afraid. I just tend to verbalize them. I'm sorry.
There's nothing to be sorry for. I think it's a skill, and I know this is something you teach to have a library of stories in your head is an amazing way to be able to embrace any conversation, and you always have something you can tell, and you always have a connection to anything that happens throughout the evening. So nothing to apologise for there at all. But because the library of other people's stories is not stored in our heads. We can maybe read this one from Trisha Lewis, if that's okay. I'll let Cyan take this one away.
Okay. The Spellbreaker. Sylvie had no choice but to ring the bell on her neighbour's front door. It mattered now more than anything. She had to know the exact location. No more guesswork leading to wasted hours and dead ends. It was the last thing she ever wanted to do, but the risk of not acting outweighed her reluctance. As she walked down the drive towards the ornate front door, she prayed for Jack to be out, away on one of his mysterious trips. Her mind pulled her back, but her feet took her forward. She needed to see him, but she knew it could reignite their conflict. She had worked hard to blot out those days, weeks, and months, and the last thing she needed was to kick it all off again. Please be out. Please be in. The bell was a ridiculous antique contraption, typical of Jack to be so awkward. It required gargantuan finger strength to depress the rusty centre far enough to set off the loud, angry burst of bell. The deed was done. Sylvie braced herself. She could hear Jack's death-defying smoker's cough getting closer. Knowing that he was now looking through the peephole, she tried to smile. The door opened so abruptly it nearly sent Sylvie flying off the crooked, slippery step. Not a good start for someone who wanted to appear in control, assertive, clear. Yes? Hi, Jack. How are you these days? Looking well. I look like death. What is it? It's next week, and I still haven't found the right place. I know you know. I need your help. Oh, now you need my help. Funny. Look, can we put the past behind us? I know we both said things we shouldn't have. No, I said everything I should have. Jack, please. I'm not inviting you in. You might discover my cauldron and book of magic spells and the newts and hemlock, not to mention. This was getting nowhere. Sylvie had to get to the point. Jack, I have accepted that the strange sounds were not part of a cult. You must agree it was a mistake to make. Please, let's move on. How you live your life is up to you. Right now, it's about Granny Mama. I didn't kill her. It wasn't me or my cult members. Stop it, Jack. That's not funny. Well, what have I got to do with Granny Mama, who incidentally never spoke a kind word to me? A lot. Sylvie tried to adjust her body language to look more compliant, more needy. She knew Jack would respond better if she didn't try the assertive method. Jack, I need you to do this for me, for the friendship we once shared, and might share again. You know that deep down I've always been fond of you, despite my what? My bad taste in shirts? No, forget I said that. Spit it out, Sylvie. I know what you want. I need you to ask nicely. I want the map you stole. I mean, borrowed from Granny Mama. Ah, the map. Please, I can't keep her in a cardboard box forever. I need to know where her special spot was. The place she wanted us to scatter her ashes. It matters. If I get it wrong, I will feel I have betrayed her. I can't sleep for worrying about it. Please, Jack, the map means nothing to you. Sylvie was now in full-on begging mode. She was also fighting back an odd mix of grief and anger, liable to erupt into sobbing or violence at any moment, or both. The map that marks the spot, eh? I've checked it out. The spot. Strange choice. Noisy. I guess the bypass wasn't there when she knew it as a kid. Shame, really. The special tree's still there, though. I tried to climb it. I didn't get that far. Getting old. Where's the map, Jack? I smoked it. What? Going to that spot took me back to my youth. I scrunched up some grass and old leaves and made a roll up. It didn't work too well. The map's a goner for sure. Sylvie was now more angry than sad. She put her finger hard down on the bell and wouldn't take it off. The sound was deafening. Her finger hurt. I hate you so much. I have always hated you, you weirdo. I curse you with your own sick spells. Get out of my way. Sylvie pushed Jack aside and stepped through into the dusty, damp-smelling hall. She took the first thing she could see and threw it to the floor. She just wanted to break something. It was all done in a red mist. Then the mist lifted. All was quiet. A grey dust lay in the gaps between the shattered ornaments. The spell is broken, said Jack calmly. I don't understand. Why aren't you angry? I've broken your vase. I've made a mess. What is it? Why are you smirking at me like that? That dust is my father. Out of nowhere, the hall was filled with the sound of laughter. Not cackling, just pure, joyful laughter. The sad spell was broken. What a story.
Well done.
Oh, Twitter, that is absolutely brilliant and also well read. I have to say, saying I look like death in a Northern Irish lilt, I think beats. But oh, that's brilliant. I absolutely love it.
And that was written from 3 prompts. So Trisha used the story cubes that you might have seen, which are those dice that have pictures on them, and she used them to make inspiration for the story. So I think that's maybe even more impressive to just really bring that up from a few prompts.
I also like the way she wrote the dialogue. It felt real. It felt very human. It felt like an experience that I think we probably all had at one point or another with people that maybe irritate us slightly, but maybe deep down we love. There was something easy to relate to the way she wrote that. What do you think?
I mean, it's almost the storytelling equivalent of MasterChef when they give you a certain number of ingredients and you've got to make a dish out of it.
Yeah. Indeed it is. Yeah. Which I think is we do talk about this quite a lot, I know. So hopefully we don't bore people with it. But it is the special thing about a prompt. It is the special thing about having some kind of boundary when you're writing, as you say, just a few ingredients, not much there to work with, but actually you can make a whole three-course meal. Never mind just a cake. I'm using those ingredients. So, yeah, there's something special.
Well, it's where the best inventions come from. I have an engineering background, and when you tell a designer you can design anything in the world, any cost, any time, they'll never produce anything. But when
Yeah.
you give them real requirements and boundaries of we need it in 2 weeks and it needs to cost this much,
Mhm.
that's where some of the best inventions come
That's
from, I
right.
think.
And they're very much the same, I think, in movies where when you've got an unlimited budget, you make a rubbish film. And where the budget's really restricted, you've got to get creative. And often you get a much better, product at the end.
Yeah, yeah, completely agree with that. On that note, I think we shall. Before we say goodbye to anybody who was watching on YouTube, we have one last very short poem to read. But I think we just want to say thank you to everybody who's submitted stories this year, everybody who's read stories, liked them, shared them, been on our Zoom evenings and chatted. And going back to Andrew's area of expertise, having the human equation and connecting on a deeper level. Thank you to everybody, and thank you, Andrew, for coming tonight.
Now it's my pleasure. It's been great fun. Thanks so much for doing it.
Oh,
Our
thank you, everybody.
pleasure.
That wraps up storytelling with Puck for 2025. And we will, as always, end on a story.
I peek through the blinds into melancholic eyes. I get drunk from the aroma of alcoholic eyes. This bottle opener won't release those pressured tears, those confined fears, those hydraulic eyes. I want to fix this, but to you my words are all untrue. You think you see through lies in hyperbolic eyes. If you open your curtains just a little, maybe I could whittle less vitriolic eyes. I'll hold the bowl, let you vomit from the soul, the pain and the toll from diabolic eyes. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.